There's a meeting founders are almost never prepared for. Not the pitch meeting, not due diligence, not even the term sheet negotiation. A board meeting. Sometimes scheduled like an normal quarterly review, sometimes hidden behind a calm calendar invite. But inside that room, something changes. The investor who once believed in you enough to wire millions into your vision looks across the table and begins asking a different question. Not how do we scale this company, but can this founder still lead it? Most founders don't realize this meeting is coming until they are already inside it. I am Navarun Sen. This is Inside the Deal Process, episode 4.
I'm Gurmeet Kaur, and I want to tell you what this episode is and what it's not. It's not a story about a bad investor. It's not a story about a bad founder. It's a story about a completely predictable sequence of events that almost nobody prepares for. Because talking about it requires knowledge that even good founders with real traction, real investment, and real teams behind them can lose their own companies. Not to fraud, not to market collapse, to a boardroom dynamic that most founders have never been taught to read, navigate, or survive. By the end of this episode, you will be able to read the signs. You will know the conversation structure before it happens, and you will know what founders who survive this moment do differently from those who don't. Let's go.
Let me introduce you to Alex. 4 years ago, Alex founded Meridian Logistics, a SaaS platform built for mid-market freight companies to manage carrier relationship compliance workflow and shipping analytics. The first 2 years were survival building. By the time Meridian raised its Series A 18 months ago, the company has crossed $380,000 in ARR, landed 11 enterprise customers, and growth had finally started bending upwards. Orion Ventures led the $6 million round. Their partner Harvey joined the board. 2 independent directors came in alongside him. Sam, who had previously built and sold a logistic technological company, and David, former CFO of the mid-sized SaaS business. Alex kept the 5th seat as CEO. The roadmap looked clean on paper. Raise the Series A, scale the sales team, double engineering, expand into the trucking vertical, push aggressively for growth, reach $1.2 million ARR within 18 months, then raise a Series B. Simple. Meridian is at $620,000 ARR. Not dead, not collapsing, still growing, but nowhere near the number the board funded. The VP of sales Alex hired 4 months after the raise is already gone. The trucking expansion was paused after the customer acquisition cost came in nearly 4 times above projections. Engineering hire fell through. Alex delayed replacing them to conserve cash. 7 months of runway remain. At the current burn rate, Meridian either raises a Series B before October or reaches profitability fast enough to survive without one. Neither path currently looks likely. And the important part in this is nobody is confused. Alex knows the number. The board knows the numbers. Everyone in the story is intelligent enough to read the same spreadsheet. The question is no longer what happened. The question is what happens next. The board meeting is scheduled in 2 weeks. It is not a regular quarterly review. You get it? Over the last 10 days, 2 private calls have happened between Harvey and David. One long email exchange happened between Sam and Harvey. Alex was not included. None of this is unusual by itself. Board members talk privately all the time, so that is quite normal. What matters is the topic. Alex will not know what those conversations were about until he enters the meeting, but we do. And before we walk into that room together, I want you to understand what happens before a founder ever realizes their leadership is being evaluated. I will hand this to Ms. Gurmeet, who is going to explain how difficult board decisions are usually made long before the actual meeting begins.
Let me explain what board governance actually looks like from the investor side of table, because founder almost universally misunderstand it. A board meeting is not where board members form their opinions. It's where they surface them. The real thinking, the real alignment happens in the days and weeks before the meeting, in one-on-one conversation between board members that the CEO is not part of. This is not conspiracy, this is standard governance practice. Board members are guardians. Their obligation is to the company, which means they must be able to speak candidly about the CEO's performance without the CEO's presence. Every serious board operates this way. In Meridian's case, Harvey initiated the pre-board conversation. He called David first. The call lasted 40 minutes. Harvey's opening was measured and deliberate. He said he was concerned about the gap between the Series A plan and the current reality, and he wanted to understand whether David shared his read. This is the standard framing. Not, I want to replace the CEO, but do you share my concern about where we are? David did share his concern. He had been watching the same number. He had been in 3 board meetings with Alex, where Alex had revised his projection downwards without what David considered to be sufficient diagnosis of why. Good CEOs, when they miss projections, come to the board with a root cause analysis and a revised plan. Alex had come with the revised plan. He had not come with the root cause analysis that fully satisfied the board. The second call was between Harvey and Sam. Sam was more cautious. She had been Meridian's customer retention data and found it genuinely strong, over 95% net revenue retention. She believed the product had found its market. Her concern was execution, specifically in sales, and she was not yet certain the solution was a new CEO rather than the new VP of sales. By the end of these 2 calls, the board had not made a decision, but they had aligned on the question, is this a leadership problem or is this an execution problem that Alex can fix with the right hire? This is the distinction that will define Alex's fate in the meeting, because the answer to that question is almost entirely determined by how Alex shows up when he says, and whether he demonstrates to the board in real time that he has the self-awareness and strategic clarity to lead through the crisis. Founders who have been coached on the dynamic know what the pre-board calls sound like. They know that if Harvey has been calling David and Sam before the meeting is not a quarterly review. They know to prepare differently. They know to call Harvey themselves before the meeting and surface the hard conversation in a one-on-one context where they have more control over the narrative. Alex did not call Harvey before the meeting. He prepared his quarterly slide deck. He updated his financial model. He planned to present the revised projection and explain the path to Series B. That preparation was not wrong. It was incomplete. Back to Mr. Sain, who is going to walk us into the room.
The meeting starts at 9 a.m. 4 faces on a screen. Alex from his home office, Harvey from Orion's conference room, David and Sam from their own offices. The first 20 minutes feels normal. Alex walks through the quarterly numbers. ARR $620,000, monthly burn $310,000, 7 months of a runway, gross margin 71%, net revenue, retention 95%, headcount 14. No surprises. The board already saw the deck 2 days earlier. David asked about margins. Sam asks about one enterprise renewal. Harvey rarely speaks. He just keeps taking notes. Alex moves into forward projections. 3 scenarios. Base case, upside case, downside case. In the base case, Meridian reaches $820,000 ARR by October. In the upside case, if 2 enterprises deal closes, they hit $950,000. In the downside case, runway is extended through higher freezes and reducing burn. Alex presents calmly, clearly, professionally. He's done this many times before. Then Harvey finally speaks, and with one sentence, the entire meeting changes. Alex, before we go further with the scenarios, can we step back for a moment? I want to have a broader conversation about where we are. The sentence matters because founders who have heard it before know exactly what it means. The meeting is no longer about the slides, it's about them. Alex closes the deck. Harvey starts carefully. He praises the product, acknowledges the retention number, says the market is still attractive. Then he says the sentence every founder fears hearing from an investor. I have been thinking a lot about whether we have the right leadership structure for what comes next. Alex goes silent. What do you mean by leadership structure? Harvey knows he knows. But in a room like this, the conversation has to be spoken out loud before it becomes real. Harvey answers carefully. I mean, whether you as a CEO are the right person to lead Meridian through this next stage, the Series B processes, and the scaling phase beyond it. Then he adds, I don't think the answer is predetermined, but I do think it's the right question for the board to ask right now. Alex looks towards Sam. No expression. Then towards David. David avoids eye contact and looks down at the notes. And in that moment, Alex understands something most founders never realize until it happens to them. I'll hand this to Gurmit now because what just happened structurally inside the room is extremely important to understand. And
let me pause the story and explain what just happened, because the sentence Harvey said, I've been thinking about whether we have the right leadership structure, is a specific kind of sentence with a specific structure and understanding. It is the first step toward surviving it. When an investor says they have lost confidence in a founder's leadership, they almost always mean one of three things. They sometimes mean all three simultaneously. The first is execution confidence. They believe the founder understands the vision but has demonstrated that they cannot consistently translate vision into operational results. Missed projections, high profile, higher failures, strategy pivots without root cause analysis, these are execution signals. This is the most common and critically the most recoverable form of lost confidence. The second is judgment confidence. They believe the founder has made a series of decisions that in retrospect reflect poor judgment, not bad luck. There is a difference. Bad luck is a VP of sales who seemed excellent and turned out to be average. Poor judgment is hiring a VP sales who 3 references check would have revealed as a consistent underperformer. Investors who lose judgment confidence are asking, can I trust this person to make the next 10 critical decisions correctly? That question is much harder to answer in a board meeting. The third is scale confidence. They believe the founder is excellent at what got the company here and not capable of what the company needs next. This is the most painful because it's not a critique of failure, it's the critique of selling. The founder builds something real. The investor simply believes the next phase requires a different kind of leader. In Alex's case, Harvey is sitting at the intersection of all three. Number one, execution. The $620,000 ARR against a $1.2 million projection. Number two, judgment. The VP of sales hire didn't work. The trucking vertical paused. The runway management. Number three, scale. The question of whether Alex can run a 20% company through a competitive Series B fundraise in a difficult market. Now, the phrase right leadership structure is deliberately vague. It doesn't always mean we want to replace you as CEO. It can mean 4 specific things in ascending order of severity. 1. We want to bring in a functional leader, a VP of sales, a COO to complement your strengths. You remain CEO, but you get operational support. This is the mildest outcome. Number 2. We want to bring in an executive coach and set a performance framework for the next 90 days. You remain CEO on a structured improvement plan. This is an accountability signal. Number 3, we want to transition you out of the CEO role and into a product or technical leadership role. You remain in the company, but you are no longer running it. This is common when founder is genuinely strong at product and genuinely weak at go to market. Number 4. We want to recruit a new CEO and your role in the company will be negotiated. This is the outcome the founder fears most and the investor pursue last. Which of these 4 outcomes Alex works out of this meeting with is almost entirely determined by what happens in the next 30 minutes, how he listens, what he says, whether he makes the boss job easier or harder. Now, back to Mr. Sain.
I want to show you something important because the next 30 minutes decides almost everything. Same board, same numbers, same company. 2 completely different outcomes. Version 1. Alex hears Harvey's concern and immediately starts defending himself. Talks about the macro environment, the difficult fundraising market, the failed VP of sales hire, the strong retention number, the product, the pipeline. Everything he says is factually correct, but none of it answers the real question. Harvey listens carefully and responds. All of that may be true, but we are also 7 months from running out of cash in a market that is materially harder than the one we raised in. Then he says, my concern isn't what got us here, it's what gets us through what comes next. Alex hears that as an escalation, so he defends harder. He talks about enterprise deals, customer trust, team morale, why replacing leadership right now would create instability. Again, none of it is irrational. But something subtle starts happening inside the room. Sam, who entered uncertain, begins leaning towards Harvey's side. David stops reviewing notes and starts watching Alex directly. Because Alex is arguing his past instead of evaluating the future objectively. And to investor that signals something dangerous, a founder too emotionally attached to separate identity from the leadership responsibility. The meeting ends with, let's continue this conversation offline. Board language for the concern remains unsolved. Now, version 2. Same opening, same sentence from Harvey, but Alex responds differently. He pauses, then says, that's a fair question and I want to answer it honestly instead of defensively. The energy in the room changes immediately. Then he continues, the execution gap is real. The VP of sales hire was judgment mistake. I moved too quickly and didn't reference check it deeply. The trucking expansion should have been paused earlier. I own both decisions. No excuses, no performance theater, no panic. Just clarity. Then he adds, what I believe through is I still understand this customer and this products better than anyone outside. CEO would on day 1, so maybe the real question isn't whether I should leave the CEO seat, but whether I have been trying to scale this company without the operational support this stage actually requires. See how it changed the perspective? Different silence now. Sam speaks first. That's much more useful farming. And suddenly, the room shifts from evaluation to collaboration. 2 hours later, a 90-day framework is agreed. The board commits to helping recruit a stronger VP of sales center performance. Targets are set. Also remains CEO. Now, because he defended himself successfully, because he made this board's problem easier to solve, I'll hand this back to Gurmeet because the difference between these 2 versions is almost entirely psychological.
I want to talk about why version 1 happens because it's not stupidity, it's not weakness, it's one of the most predictable responses in all of human psychology. When someone who has invested years of their life into something is told that something may be taken from them. The founder's identity and the company are the same object. This is the central fact that makes board conflict so psychological complex. A founder who has spent 4 years building Meridian Logistics, who woke up at 3 a.m. thinking about the product, who convinced their co-founder, their first employees, their family, cannot separate I am being asked whether I should lead this company from I am being told I'm not good enough. Those are two completely different sentences. They land identically. The defense response is the brain's threat response applied to professional identity. When you perceive your core identity as under attack, the fight response is faster than reflection. You produce evidence, you argue, you protect what you built by explaining why you deserve to keep it. This feels like self-advocacy. In a board context, it reads as the inability to evaluate yourself objectively, which is ironically exactly the concern the investor has. The investor in that room are not your enemies. They are people who have staked their own reputation and their funds capital on your success. When they ask the leadership question, they are not celebrating your failure. They are terrified of it. Harvey doesn't want Alex to leave. He wants him to prove in real time that he can do what Harvey needs him to do. The question is a test, not a verdict. These are three reframes that separate founders who survive this conversation from those who don't. The first is separate the question from the answer. Is Alex the right CEO? Is a legitimate question regardless of the answer. A board that never asks it is not doing its job. Receiving the question as a legitimate, not as an attack, is the first move. The second, own the data before the board does. Every piece of bad news in that room is information Alex already has. He knows about the VP of sales. He knows about the trucking vertical. The board cannot use information against you that you have already given them along with your own interpretation. The third, turn the verdict into a problem. The investor is presenting a concern. Concerns are problems. Problems have solution. The founder who says, let me help design the solution, is doing something fundamentally different from the founder who says, let me argue against the concern. One is a partner, one is a defendant. None of this is easy. It requires a founder to access clarity under conditions of extreme emotional pressure. It requires the ability to say in front of 4 people, including the person who funded your dream, you might be right and here is how I am thinking about it. That sentence is the hardest sentence a founder will ever say in a professional context. It is also the sentence that most often keeps them in their seat.
What happens after the meeting like this usually falls into 3 categories. Outcome 1, the performance framework. This is the best case scenario once partial confidence has been lost. The founder stays CEO but now operates under the structured oversight. 90-day targets, specific hires, specific metrics, regular reviews. Nobody calls it a probation, but that's effectively what it is. In Alex version 2, this is the outcome. And yes, it's survival, but it changes the relationship permanently. Every important decision is now examined differently. Even if nobody says it out loud, the second outcome role transition, the founder moves out of the CEO seat into a product strategy or a technical leadership. A new operator comes in. This happens far more often than founders realize. And contrary to the proper belief, it is not always failure. Some founders are exceptional builders, exceptional product thinkers, exceptional visionaries. But scaling a 20-person company through a difficult capital environment requires a completely different skill set. The founders who accept this transition with maturity often preserve influence, equity, reputation, and long-term upside. The founders who turn it into war usually damage all 4. Then comes outcome 3, the exit. The founder leaves entirely, sometimes negotiated cleanly, sometimes forced through governance rights signed years earlier inside the term sheet. Board restructuring, voting control, removal mechanism, all legal, all intentional, all built into venture governance from the beginning. And this is the part founders rarely understand early enough. By the time removal becomes formal, the real decision was usually made weeks or months before. The founders who live best are usually the ones who recognize the shift early, before trust fully collapsed. Because once goodwill disappears inside a board relationship, the outcome becomes procedural. I want to be very direct about something now. None of these outcomes are painless. Performance framework damage confidence. Role transitions require ego death. Exits feel like grieving something still alive. The real question is not how do founders avoid pain. The real question is how much influence do they still have when the difficult conversation begins. And most of that answer is determined by how they behave. I will hand this to Ms. Gurmeet for the.
Let me close with what founders can actually do. Not in the meeting, before it ever gets to the meeting. The board crisis almost never arrives without warning. These are signal. Founders who learn to read them have more time, more options, and more control over the outcome. Here are 5 things that change the trajectory. 1. Own the bad news first. Before your board members calls you about a concern, you should have already surfaced it. Every time Meridian missed a monthly target, Alex could have sent a 1 paragraph email to the board. This month came in below plan. Here is why I believe it happened. Here is what I am changing. I'll update you on the change in 30 days. That discipline, the consistent self-reporting of bad news with your own diagnosis, does more to maintain investor confidence than any positive update you will ever send. It tells the investor this founder sees reality clearly and responds to it. Number 2, have the hard conversation one-on-one before it becomes a board agenda item. Alex didn't call Harvey in the 2 weeks before the meeting. He should have. I know the numbers and are below plan. I want to talk through my thinking before the board meeting, and I want to hear your honest read on where we are. That call would not have prevented the confidence question. It would have given Alex the chance to hear it in a lower stakes context, prepare his response, and potentially reshape the agenda before he walked into the room. Build your board allies before you need them. Sam came into that meeting uncertain, not convinced that a CEO change was the answer. Alex had a potential ally in the room and did not know it because he had not invested in the relationship with Sam beyond the formal board interaction. Board members who know a founder well, who have had dinners, calls, visits to offices, are board members who advocate in the pre-meeting conversation. Alex had Harvey's concern and Sam's openness with the relationship investment. Sam's openness becomes active sport. Number 4, know your governance rights goal. Alex signed a term sheet. He needs to know exactly what it says about board composition changes, CEO removals, and voting thresholds. Not because he should use those provisions as leverage that almost always accelerates the worst outcome, but because knowing the mechanism demystifies the fear. A founder who understands precisely what it would have taken to remove them is a founder who can assess the real level of risk in a board conversations. Number 5, separate the company's need from your ego's need. This is the hardest one. Alex built Meridian. It's his company, but the company has 14 employees who depend on its success. It has customers who relied on the product. It has a cap table full of people who invested their capital in the outcome. The question, is Alex the right CEO for the next phase, is a legitimate question in a service of all those stakeholders. A founder who can genuinely hold that question as a real question, not as an existential threat, gives themselves the best possible chance of answering it in a way that serves both the company and themselves. Let me close the loop on the story. The outcome is Alex is in a board meeting where the questions of his leadership is formally on the table. The company has 7 months of runway. The path to Series B is uncertain. What happens next depends upon what Alex does in that next 30 minutes. The decision is Harvey did not make this decision lightly. He made it because he believes the company's survival depends upon asking it. He is not wrong to ask. The question is whether Alex can receive it as a question it is rather than the threat it feels like. And the lesson here is board meetings do not become difficult suddenly. They become difficult gradually through misprojection that weren't fully diagnosed, through one-on-ones that weren't proactively scheduled, through relationships that weren't invested in before they were needed. The founders who navigate these moments are almost never the ones with the best defenses. They are the ones who build enough trust and enough self-awareness to make the hard conversation a shared problem rather than confrontation. That's the Inside the Deal process. I'm Gurmeet Kaur, with me Nabun Sen. Thank you.